Before we get started, we'd like to flag that today's episode of the Make It Big podcast very briefly touches on the topic of suicide. We want to provide this content warning for any of our listeners for which this might be a trigger. If you or a loved one are struggling with suicidal ideation, we encourage you to talk to someone. You can reach out to the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline by dialing 988. Now on to today's episode.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining today. This is Big Picture, Ecommerce's live bi-weekly show on social. I'm Leah Spector. I'm the brand manager at Ecommerce, and I'm joining you live from Austin, Texas at the Ecommerce headquarters. I'm thrilled to welcome our guest today, Mr. Tod Wilson, founder and CEO of Mr. Tod's Pies. Tod, thank you so much for being here.
Hey, Leah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I've been looking forward to spending some time with you. And it looks like the pies beat me to Texas.
The pies are here, and we're going to get to try one on air in a little bit. So that's what I'm looking forward to. But really excited to share some of your story with the folks watching at home. Just a quick intro to Mr. Tod's Pies. Launched in 2002, Mr. Tod's Pie Factory in New Jersey quickly made a name for itself for their delicious Southern-style pies. And I think Mr. Tod perfected and maybe popularized the sweet potato pie. In 2009, Tod became the first ever Shark Tank contestant and actually earned a deal from the Sharks. And he ended up declining it, which we're going to get into in a little bit. I definitely want to hear that story. Mr. Tod's Pies can be found online at their Ecommerce store, mrtods.com, where you can order pies for delivery anywhere to the US. So if you want to get one of these for yourself, I highly recommend it. And as a reminder, we are live. So if you have any questions for Tod, drop them in the comments and we might get to them on air. But let's jump in. Tod, thanks again for being here. First off, just in your own words, tell us about Mr. Tod's Pies.
Yeah, so, Mr. Tod's Pies is really my passion. I mean, we talk about entrepreneurship and, what the end goal is. And my goal has always remained the same, Leah, and that's to make Mr. Tod's a household name, a national brand, along the same lines as Mrs. Smith's, Entenmann's, or Tasty Cake, you name it. That has always been the goal for Mr. Tod's.
Love that. How did you get into baking and selling pies?
Well, the funny story is I went to the University of Richmond, and before my freshman year, I figured I wanted to be a lawyer or in law enforcement because that was always my first passion. So with that in mind, I majored in criminal justice and Spanish. But during that summer prior to going to Richmond, my godfather said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm getting ready to go to college." He said, "Why don't you come up and help me start a bakery?" So I head up to New Jersey from Virginia, where I grew up, and I walk into his house and it just like reeks of pie. And I was like, "What are you doing in here?" So he says, "Come on downstairs." I go downstairs and he's got these huge pizza ovens with sweet potato pies everywhere. And so lo and behold, by the end of that summer, we moved out of his home into a little storefront in downtown Patterson. And then every year I came back, the business just kept growing. One summer I would hire 2 people, the next summer 4 people. So by the time I graduated from Richmond, it was like, you know what? I think I want to be an entrepreneur now. Seeing my godfather coming home from work every day, coming to the factory saying, "Where are the pies, Tod? You got to make deliveries today." And just that whole entrepreneurial rush, that's probably one of the reasons that I got the entrepreneurial bug is watching my godfather and what he did. And I also learned from working with him that if you have a tangible product that people like, and in some cases love, you can make a living from it. And that's really how I got started in the pie business.
I love that entrepreneurship can attract people who want to be in kind of like a high adrenaline or like high energy job because there is so much kind of fast paced, exciting work. So I think that's really interesting. Okay, so you got involved with your godfather. Tell me about those early days of launching Mr. Tod's Pies. Were you doing everything yourself, baking and shipping from home, or did you start first with a retail store?
Well, see, the funny thing is, I don't think a lot of people know this, but I worked for my godfather internally for a number of years. And then I went off and became a distributor where I was basically taking his pies and selling them to customers. And along that time, we got McDonald's as a customer. And the sweet potato pie was outselling the apple pies in a lot of markets. But as you know, dealing with companies like McDonald's and big concerns like that, things have to be done a certain way. And we actually lost the McDonald's account. And that was kind of my moment where, at the time I felt like maybe my godfather didn't see the bigger picture. And I saw it immediately the way, apple pie is a staple at McDonald's. And here, this little sweet potato pie from Paterson, New Jersey was outselling the apple pie. And that was kind of my moment to just say, you know what, I'm going to take the plunge and do this on my own. But when I first started, it was called Classic Desserts. And I came up with this idea that I'm going to be like a clearinghouse for all things dessert. And so at the time, Leah, I bought two things, a domain, whybake.com. And this was probably 2000 the year 2000, I think. I bought whybake.com, WHYBAKE. Why bake when we can do it for you? And I also got the 800 number at the time, 888 Why Bake. And as you know, you just can't get those types of numbers anymore. So I've had that domain and those and that number for over 20 years. And that was my first foray on to my own pie business. And then shortly thereafter, we know what happened because that's what they talked about on Shark Tank.
That's so interesting. I didn't realize that the company you're with your godfather, McDonald's, was a client. Was that regional? And then what kind of happened that led to the end of that and kind of led you to split off and do your own thing?
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, a local operator said, "Hey, I kept hearing about these pies. Can you come by my store?" So it was a guy named Herb Clay in Newark, New Jersey. I went to his store. He was a non-traditional operator. And at the time, McDonald's was looking for minority suppliers. Herb himself was African American. He went to some of his fraternity brothers and said, "Hey, I've got this great pie. Let's put it into our stores." And then, McDonald's is kind of like straight-laced, button down collar type of company. And they said, "Hey, where is this? Where did this come from?" But Herb had already had the numbers. So he was able to show them, "Hey, look, this pie is outselling the apple pie." And next thing we know, we got a big yellow semi pulling up to our factory in Paterson, New Jersey. And the guy would come some days and he'd wait 8 hours just to get a half a load. And we just couldn't keep up. And again, with McDonald's, they like things done a certain way. And then ultimately, the relationship ended. And my godfather just didn't see a need to do business with McDonald's at that point. But it was tremendous experience.
Yeah, early experience with wholesale. That's clearly been something that, has been a strategy of yours for a while. So we'll definitely talk about that when that comes to Mr. Todd's. So you split off and you start Classic Desserts. When does it become Mr. Todd's Pies? And what were those early years like?
Well, like any entrepreneurial story, they're always brutal. You're doing everything by yourself. You're peeling potatoes, you're delivering pies. In fact, as I was preparing, I found an old invoice for one of my first delivery vehicles, Leah. It was a 1990 Plymouth Voyager. You might not even remember that year, but it was a Plymouth Voyager, and I paid $1,800 for it. So, I was picking up supplies in it. I was delivering pies. And ultimately, like most entrepreneurs, eventually I wound up sleeping in the back of that Plymouth Voyager. But that's why we do what we do. It's not always for the money. It's not always for the headlines or the highlights. It's, look, this is what drives me. This is my passion. And that's what's going to take you through those long days and nights.
Yeah, absolutely. When you started to get some momentum, what was that like? Was it, really busy in the store? Were you already thinking about things like selling online, or were you focused on, physical retail?
Yeah. So, again, I'll point back to Shark Tank, and I'm sure we'll get into that. But after I went out and got my MBA in the streets the first time, I said, you know what? When I restart this thing, I'm going to put my name on it. And to me, there's always been something different about when you put your name on it. And I said, well, what am I going to call it? And I remember at the time, a lot of the customers that I sold to would always say, "Mr. Todd, you got my pies? Where are my pies, Mr. Todd? Da, 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 da." And I said, you know what? I'm going to call it Mr. Todd's Pies. Put my name on it. And sometimes, Leah, there's just a little, I don't want to say extra effort, but it means a little bit more when your name is on the door. So I started in a old bagel shop that had gone out of business in Somerset, New Jersey. I was like waiting tables at night, making pies during the day and off hours. And then one day the landlord says to me, "Hey, you rented this store to be a store. What are you doing in there?" I said, well, we're making pies. I said, "But give me a few weeks and I'll get a store set up." So I had no retail experience at all. But I knew that if I didn't open a store, I wouldn't have that location for very long. So that's how I started the retail business. One morning, I just woke up, opened the doors, put some pies on the counter, sold coffee. Before I knew it, it just took off.
Wow. So you quit your day job essentially when you decided to take that leap and open the store.
Yeah. So, and at that time, again, I was regrouping from having to start over when I left my godfather. So it wasn't really a day job, if you will. I was waiting tables at night. And, I just knew I had to get back started. And then I heard about this, like I said, a bagel shop that was going out of business. And that was my first foray into, creating the Mr. Todd's brand.
So in those days, were you able to kind of self-fund from that wholesale business that you had kind of started in advance, or did you go after funding? How did you make that decision?
Yeah, so it's funny, and today is totally different, but I'll never forget in 2002, a gentleman I knew who was an exterminator, he referred me to a local banker. The gentleman's name was Mayo Sisler, and he was the chairman of a bank. And I went to see him, and he said, "How can I help you, son?" I said, "Well, my hands are shaking." I said, "I need $15,000, sir. I'm starting a pie business." And he says, "I've heard good things about you. Come this way." And he literally walked me to a loan officer and says, "Hey, we're going to give this guy $16,000. We're going to give him 12 months to pay it back. That's it. No underwriting, nothing but a handshake." He had a cigar in his mouth. And that's how I got started. It was crazy. But, those things don't happen anymore today.
Yeah. Looking back and, comparing that to today.
Yeah.
How do you think that compares today for entrepreneurs who are trying to get that like self-funding and kind of make the leap?
Yeah, I mean, when I look back on my journey, and I always tell people, the pie is still in the oven, the story is still being written. I remember a gentleman from CNBC, a producer, had talked to me about going on to a TV show. And I said, well, now's not the time. I said, but, there's a Ray Kroc story. There's Colonel Sanders. There's Dave Thomas. One day there's going to be a story about Mr. Todd's. And I might not be the one to benefit from it, but I'm okay with that. But one day, there'll be a story. So it's kind of funny. We got off on that, but yeah.
So, okay. So you've got your loan, you're focusing on the store full time. What are those years leading up to 2009 like, where you're really growing your business and starting to think about expansion? What was that like, and how much volume were you doing? Like, what was kind of the vibe?
Yeah. So again, once I got the retail started, it provided an extra flow of income, because at night we were taking our pies and delivering them to what we would call chicken shacks, places in the inner city that sold chicken and biscuits and that kind of stuff. But in the daytime, I had a steady stream of local customers coming in to buy a banana cream pie. We had bagels, we had lunch sandwiches. So, a lot of things today, you see people trying to diversify their menu. We were doing that years ago because we knew you just couldn't sell sweets all day per se. So we had the coffee, we had the tuna sandwich, and that provided the daily cash flow, because a lot of times with wholesale, it's check based. So a lot of times you're on a net 30 basis. So the retail gave us great daily income. And then eventually, as we got pies in more people's hands, the word started to spread about Mr. Todd's home style pies. And then one day, we got this big write-up about being the best pie shop in New Jersey. And it just kind of took off from there. I mean, I remember there was one, the top 10 dishes of the decade in New Jersey, not desserts, dishes. And our banana cream pie was voted number 3 by the largest newspaper in New Jersey.
That's incredible, and speaks to still the value of basically word of mouth. Today, word of mouth looks a little bit different, right, with social media, but like early news coverage, like people just hearing about your brand, I think is still the very best way to earn customers and keep them coming back. Leading into 2009, that's when you appeared on Shark Tank.
Sure.
You were the very first contestant on August 9th, 2009. Tell me, how did that come about?
Again, in preparing for our discussion, I kind of went back through nostalgia and I found this old email. This is an email from December 19th, 2008, Leah. And it says, "Congratulations, you're in the Shark Tank. We'll see you in January." But the process started in October of 2008. And I got this email one day. I was looking to grow my business. I had a retail store. And I had this concept of, okay, we've got a great store, but we can only do so much in there. We need a bigger facility, like a central baking facility, I would call it the CBF. And then we would have little satellite stores around it, but I needed capital. And bank loans will only take you so much, so far, friends and family. So I got this email about this new show from Mark Burnett where aspiring entrepreneurs could get a chance to get investment money. I told all my friends and they said, "Oh man, that's a scam. Leave it alone." I said, "Nah, man, this is Mark Burnett, the guy from Survivor. The guy's got to be legit." So I said, to hell with what they think. I'm going to apply. And again, it started in October. And then by December, I got the email saying that I was accepted into it. Next thing I know, I'm one of only, I think, 30 people out of thousands that applied across the country. They flew about 30 of us out to California, Studio City. And of those 30 people, I think about 12 of us actually made it to TV. And of those 12, as you mentioned, I was the first one that they put up front. And this was the pilot. So we didn't even know if it was going to be a TV show. But after that first episode, ABC bought it. And what are we talking now? The rest is history, right? I mean, amazing.
So basically, you're responsible for getting Shark Tank picked up as a series.
Well, look, I'll say this, Leah. I'm not a TV person, but from what I'm told, when a new show comes out, those first 5 minutes are very important. I walked in there and you could see it on my face. This is what I do. I'm committed. This is my business. And I think that played a role, no doubt, but I was just being me. I was just being Mr. Todd. It was no cameras, no lights. It was just coming right from here. So, it was a famous line that came out of that season. "Don't cry about money. It never cries for you." But I wasn't really crying about money. That's just the passion that I have inside of me as an entrepreneur and as a person.
So what was that day like? What do you remember from filming?
People always ask me, was I nervous, right? And I said, any entrepreneur that tells you they're nervous when they've got a chance to go in front of someone, they're not really an entrepreneur, in my humble opinion. You know what I was nervous about, Leah? At 30-something years old, I had never been to California. So I was nervous about flying from New Jersey to California. And so, I got on the bird. I was like, oh, this is no big deal. We were very high up in the sky. The only thing, there was a guy in front of me who was pretty big, and he kept leaning back. And that was the only bad part of it. And then all of a sudden we go over Colorado and the pilot's like, I'm going to have you look out the window. You'll see the Colorado skyline, Denver skyline, and I'm going to have you put on your seatbelt because we're going to hit a little chop from here on out. From the time he said that till we got to LAX, I thought we were done. I thought it was over. It was that bad of a flight. And so at the end of the week, Barbara and Damon came up to me and they said, "Todd, where you going?" I said, "I ain't getting back on that MFer. I'm taking the train home." And I literally took the train from downtown LA
Oh my gosh.
to Newark, New Jersey. And Leah, if you want to meet the highs and lows, the good and bad of society, take a train from LA to Newark. So that's what I remember the most.
Wow, that's so funny. Okay, so you had a rocky flight and a little bit of turbulence. And then your episode, a little turbulent too. This is so fascinating to me. So you did earn an offer from the Sharks. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I saw you asked for $460,000 in exchange for 10% equity in the company. And that Barbara and Damon actually did offer you that $460,000, but for a whopping 50% stake in the business. And you declined that offer. What was going through your head in that moment? How did you make that decision?
Well, this might get me in a little bit of trouble, but I hope it won't because I've never really talked about it on camera. But in 2008, Leah, when I applied to the show, I wasn't asking for $460,000. I was asking for 1.2 million in 2008. And they were like, Todd, your chocolate pecan pie is out of this world, but that's too much money to ask for on TV. And I was like, well, what's the purpose of me coming out there? You're asking me, what do I need? I'm telling you what I need to do it the right way. I need 1.2 million. At the time, my sales were well over $1 million. So I was asking for 1.2 million, and I only wanted to give up 2%, 10%, because I knew, Leah, having worked for my godfather, having seen my retail store, what the potential was with this product, that it could easily be a 20, 30, $40 million business. But they said it's too much money. So when you see me asking for 460, that was really what the producers had me bring the number down to make it better for TV. So now it's customary. You see everybody asking for that kind of money. And it's funny, you asked me, what else do I remember? At one point during the history of Shark Tank, you remember when they used to let people think about it? So I remember when we were filming in season 1, when they said, and you see it on TV, what are you going to do? I said, I need to think about it for a minute. They were like, cut, what are you doing? I was like, yo, this is a big time decision. I need to think about this, because in the back of my mind, Lee, I'm saying 460 is not what I need. It's not enough. And so we took a break.
50% ownership.
Right. So we took a break, and I went into the restroom, and as lo and behold, Mr. Wonderful was in the restroom with me. I spoke to the guy, and he just snarls at me like, so off camera, he was the same way as he is on TV. But
Okay.
when I walked back in there, Leah, I said to myself, I got to accept the deal, because if I don't, I might not even make it to TV. Right? So I went along with the deal. And, after we got back, I spent a lot of time talking with Barb, Damon, great people. I remember walking through Central Park with Damon a few times, but went to his office. And ultimately I said, you know what, for all the blood, sweat, and tears that I put in, knowing that this is not enough cash to really do it the right way, I'm going to have to, I can't do this deal. That's the behind the scenes.
How do you feel about that? No, that's so interesting. I love the behind the scenes bit too. How do you feel about that decision looking back?
Well, I don't have many regrets in life, and certainly I don't regret making that decision. Look, could my trajectory been accelerated? Perhaps, but again, I didn't get into this just for the money. I got into it because this is my passion. I have a very long-term vision, and unfortunately, Leah, because of this little culprit right here, we think that everything happens overnight between being a TikTok star and Instagram, but it doesn't, Leah. The reality is entrepreneurship is a grind. Doesn't mean that you can't come upon success, because it's a lot easier today than it was back in the day. You don't have to cold call. You don't have to do the mailers like we used to do. One little video now can make you go viral. So it's totally different. But I don't have any regrets of not taking the deal, because to this day, every day, I'm just as excited today as when I first started.
Absolutely. And, you mentioned kind of becoming a star overnight. Did appearing on Shark Tank boost your business?
Literally not a day goes by. And that was August 9th, 2009. Not one day goes by that someone doesn't say, I saw you on Shark Tank. And understand this.
Oh, wow.
When I went on Shark Tank, there was no TikTok. There was no Instagram. There was none of that. I mean, Facebook was really the
good old days.
Yeah. I think it was, do you remember MySpace?
Oh, yeah. Top 8.
Yeah. And I think I joined Twitter in 2010 or 2011. So I always say to myself, what about if I went on Shark Tank now with all the social media that we have? It'd be totally different.
It would be wild. Aside from, that importance of ownership and that lesson of longevity and, the long-term grind, I think is really valuable. Were there any other lessons that you from Shark Tank that you took back into your business? I mean, having that mentorship relationship with Damon and Barbara, that's got to be pretty great.
Yeah, and it's funny. I remember we went to QVC one time. We sold on QVC, and I was in the room talking to the directors about my story and about the pies. And like on Shark Tank, I got a little choked up and I started tearing up. And so we walked out of the office, and Damon said to me, "Man, if you ever pull that SHIT again, I'll never go anywhere with you." I said, "Damon, I'm just being me, man. I'm passionate about this." But yeah, for sure, Leah. I mean, having people like Barb and Damon, or certainly a guy like Mark Cuban in your corner, it can only help you. And long term, I've learned, and we all know that it's very hard today, especially as fast as things move, to do it by yourself. So surrounding yourself with talented people, certainly ones like them that have that celebrity factor, goes a long ways.
Absolutely. Okay, so those are the Shark Tank days. Valuable. You learned a lot, and you still get asked about it to this day, which I think is great. He has a great blog, a few blogs on your website about the story. So I encourage you all to check that out on mrtods.com. Question from Rachel Sperling on LinkedIn. Thank you, Rachel, for the question. Tod, was there ever a moment when you weren't sure if you were on the right path and nearly gave up? And if so, what made you keep pushing through?
Wow, Rachel, great question. I'm going to give you the short story, and I'm going to try not to get choked up because it took me a long time to share this story. But again, it's well documented. My first time out, I lost everything. I had 5 cars repossessed. The last one I was taken back to a dealership. My insurance was expired. There was no registration. License was suspended. Didn't even know. I was brokered and broke. Cop pulls me over and says, "Look, none of your paperwork is good. Come with me." I didn't even have $100 to get out of jail. One of my friends bailed me out. And so that was the end of 2001. And as you know, in March of 2002, I created Mr. Todd's. And I told the young lady I was dating at the time, "I need you to pick me up from the courthouse." And she said, "Why?" I said, "Oh, I'm going to lose my license." She said, "What?" I said, "Oh, yeah, I didn't want to tell you. Things were going so well, but I had a little issue last year with my license." So I go to court that day, Rachel, and I run into the cop that pulled me over. And he said to me, "Look, man, I know you're not a bad guy. You probably were just going through something, but it's pretty cut and dry. You're going to lose your license for about 6 months." So I'm like, damn, I'm delivering, I'm picking up supplies. I said, okay. So it was busy that day in Princeton Courthouse, Princeton, New Jersey. They rescheduled it to Monday. So I go back to the store. I run into my girlfriend. She says, "What happened?" I said, "Oh, they moved it to Monday." She said, "You better take your butt out here this weekend and sell some pies because you're going to lose your license." So I go to court on Monday, Rachel, and I run into my attorney. I got my head down on the bench. And my attorney comes up and says, "Did you hear what happened?" I said, "Steve, not today." He said, "No, Jim." I said, "Steve, I'm going to lose my damn license. Not today." He said, "They dropped the case. The cop killed himself last night." So I got on my knees and I told God, "I'll never stop. How can I? How can I give up?" The same guy who I saw on Friday told me he understood I was going through something. Guess what? He was too. But we dealt with it in different ways. Sunday night, Princeton cop shoots himself with his service revolver because he's distraught over his fiance leaving him. And that ain't no creator's myth. That ain't no story. That's the real life story that you don't see on TikTok or Instagram. And it took me a long time to share it, but that's why I can't give up, Rachel. That's why I never gave up.
That is so powerful. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. And I could see how that is something that would stick with you for your rest of your life and make you just want to keep pushing. So,
yeah.
Wow.
How do you give up after something like that?
Yeah. Thank your lucky stars.
Yeah. How do you have a feel sorry moment? So for me, when I see the news today and I see people giving up and feeling like they can't go on any further, I remember I was at Babson College speaking one time and I said, look, if there's anybody that should have jumped off a bridge or walked in front of a train, you're looking at them. You're looking at them. But even at my darkest moment, I've never felt like I couldn't get out of it. I couldn't find a way. So I always tell students, I know it's different than when I came up. You've got a lot of outside influences, but here, take my number, give me a call, and I'll help you through it because I've been there. And you just got to keep believing. You got to surround yourself with the right people and just never give up. I can't speak to health issues and mental illness, but I'm just talking about not being able to be uncomfortable. And part of being an entrepreneur is being able to be uncomfortable. You have to be comfortable with that.
Cooking and I think pies specifically are so much about like sharing joy and warmth and like love and community. It actually makes a lot of sense to hear this story from you because, you're an entrepreneur at heart and you've definitely had some challenges. But to me, you're like the epitome of sharing that warmth and that experience. So I'm sure the students are incredibly grateful for those lessons. Is that something you do a lot, is kind of go speak at colleges and student groups?
Oh, yeah. Colleges, high schools, anybody that I can share my story with, because again, I get it. It's totally different today. People are, they're bullying people and making videos and putting on the internet. I mean, that's just stuff that's unheard of. I mean, I was bullied as a kid, but one day I had to step up and knock the bully out so he wouldn't mess with me anymore. But, I understand it's a different day and time, but because of all these outside influences, Leah, we just feel like, we got to be here by a certain time, or we got to do this by a certain age. And that's just not the way it is in reality. It just doesn't happen like that.
Yeah. So kind of on that point, talking about challenges, shifting gears a little bit, it's Black History Month. Happy
Sure.
Black History Month to everyone out there. So I wanted to ask, has your experience as a Black person shaped or influenced your business journey or your entrepreneurship?
That's an excellent question. I remember I was a commencement speaker at the University of Richmond where I graduated. And before I gave my commencement speech, Dr. Morrill, who was the president at the time, he said to me, Todd, if you keep going the way you're going, you're going to be on the cover of Black Enterprise one day. And I turned around, I looked at him and said, Dr. Morrill, I'm going to be on the cover of Fortune one day, And that's always been my platform, Leah. I don't see color. All I want to see is courage and commitment. What do you have here? I don't care where you're from. I don't care what kind of family you come from. What do you have in here? But I think unfortunately, as a Black entrepreneur, if you look at things like VC funding, Black business owners, male business owners receive less than 2% of all venture capital dollars. Why is that? Why is it when I walk into my supermarkets where we do a lot of business with ShopRite and other companies like Food Bazaar, I see all the employees are Black. I see a lot of the shoppers are Black. But if I said, Leah, I'll give you $500 if you can go on the aisles and find me 5 products from Black-owned companies, you probably wouldn't get the money. So why is that? It can't be lack of education. It can't be, laziness. It can't be any of those things. So something is happening that prevents that. And so when I say it's not just for me, I'm trying to pave the way for the people coming behind me because it shouldn't be like that. And again, I don't see race, I don't see color, but if I just take that one product, sweet potato pie, which is the most iconic food, not dessert, but the most iconic food, arguably, in the African American community, why isn't there a national brand? Why didn't my godfather go national? Why isn't Mr. Todd's a national brand? What you'll find is you'll find a lot of mom and pop shops across the country. You can do the same thing with soul food restaurants. We're some of the greatest cooks you'll ever meet. Why isn't there an African-American cheesecake factory or P.F. Chang's? We keep all those people in business, but where are the Black chains? Something has caused that to happen. And, when I talk about my goals, I want Mr. Todd's to be that official national brand of sweet potato pie. From a narrow perspective, all our pies are great, but that's one of my personal goals. And the difference is you could say, well, Todd, what about Mrs. Smith's? What about Entenmann's? They make a sweet potato pie. Yeah, but they don't have street credibility. And what I mean by that is, as gregarious as I may be as a person, good salesman, what have you, I could never be Mr. Bagel or Mr. Pizza. It just doesn't go together. But I can be Mr. Sweet Potato Pie all day long. And so that's what drives me is, let's find a way to level the playing field. Because right now, in my humble opinion, unless you're an athlete or an entertainer, when you're African American, you looked at it in a different light than if you're a business person. And if that weren't the case, then we would see a lot of huge Black brands. And I know strides have been made since George Floyd, but I think a lot of those things were just, charity plays, that were good for checking the boxes in corporate America. But the numbers don't lie,
Yeah, I know there's a lot of things like, 15% pledge. And I know, some VC firms are talking about, trying to find more Black entrepreneurs and people of color to support. Our ERG for people of color and allies, VC in Color, we've shared a few resources on, VC funding and getting involved in tech as a Black person. So if you're watching and you're interested in any of that, I'll drop a link to some of that in the comments. But,
and give them a pie.
Going back to, okay, yeah, actually that we'll do that. I will give give away a pie to anybody who drops another question in for us. Yeah. But back to your goal of Mr. Todd's Pies being a national brand, that kind of brings us to today. You recently made the decision to shut down your physical stores and focus on e-commerce on MrTods.com. How did you come to that decision, and how has that changed your idea of your business model?
Well, just to be clear, our primary source of revenue is in the supermarket space. That's our primary source of revenue. We sell our pies, both 4-inch and 8-inch, in a lot of local supermarkets.
In wholesale.
Yeah, wholesale.
Nice.
And again, that goes back to my days with my godfather, seeing the whole McDonald's transaction and how that worked. And, it's funny, I heard Magic Johnson say one day, whether it's a $10 million deal or a $100 million deal, I've got to put in the same effort. So why not go for the $100 million deal? And so if I'm going to grind and sweat to make sure the retail store is open every day and, make sure all the employees show up, I can put that same effort into building a wholesale business and in turn, reach more people, reach a wider audience, because ultimately the goal is to make Mr. Todd's a household name. And, one of the best ways of doing that today is through e-commerce. I mean, look, pies are in New Jersey on Tuesday, and on Wednesday morning before 10 a.m., they're in Austin, Texas. That's amazing. And so that's when I knew that, we've got to really step up our e-commerce game. We found BigCommerce, and I always tell people, if they're looking for a platform, look no further than BigCommerce. I remember one of the first times I called about questions and I encountered a phone rep, and the guy was just so nice, so informative. I said, you know what? BigCommerce is my type of company. That's why I've never left. And I've had offers, but I really like what you guys do. And I really appreciate it. But we also sell on Amazon. We're on Walmart.com. So there is a big future, as you know, in e-commerce.
Well, we're thrilled and honored to still be able to serve you in your business. Getting towards the end of today, well, how does, if you look at your business mix, is there any kind of interplay between that relationship of, wholesale and e-commerce? I know some people are able to use data from e-commerce to inform their wholesale strategy and vice versa. Is there anything you've kind of learned new in that regard?
The wholesale helps us prepare. Well, I should say the wholesale helps us in our preparation for e-commerce. And what I mean by that is, think about it. If you're just operating a retail store, what are you doing? You're probably doing small batches, maybe 10 pies, 20 pies. But when you're in wholesale, you're doing 1,000, you're doing 2,000 pies. So as the orders start to come in, if you already have a wholesale operation, you're able to respond to large quantity orders much easier if you already have a wholesale establishment set up. And so that's been one of the major pluses for us, is that I don't have to worry about opening a retail store. All I need to know is if I had 100 orders from Amazon today, just making sure with my staff that we've got all those packages ready, box out the door, and we deliver as promised. It's not always perfect, but it makes it a lot easier because we're already doing volume behind the scenes,
What's, focus on wholesale and, expand e-commerce. What's next for you? What are you focusing on to get closer to that goal of being the national brand for pies?
Well, we definitely have some things in the works, some that I can't discuss right now. But I think if I can do more things like we're doing right now, just to get the story out there, spend time talking with people, put pies in as many people's hands as possible via e-commerce, I think that'll certainly go a long ways towards helping us get there. But it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's a marathon.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to take a bite of this pie really quick. Do you want to tell the viewers about your pies and what makes these so special?
So that looks like sweet potato pie. And if I can tell you anything, Leah, every day we peel North Carolina jumbo yams to make that sweet potato pie. The crust
so good.
is made from scratch. We use very premium butter, like Plugra, which is a European style butter, 82% butter fat. McCormick spices. Just, my platform has always been to give people the best. And sometimes people say, Mr. Todd, you're charging $50 for a pie online, da, 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 da. And I tell them, well, look, we're giving you quality. And in my opinion, Leah, pie is probably one of the most sacred items in the history of the United States. You can talk about baseball, hot dog, Chevrolet. What's the next thing? Apple pie, right? But somehow over the years, especially in the supermarket industry, we've come to think that a 10-inch pie should be $1.99. And so when I think about, where are we going to position ourselves? We don't want to be the $1.99 pie. We don't want to be the $2.99 pie. Mr. Todd's represents quality and commitment to giving the best we can give you. And that's the space we want to occupy, giving you the best.
Well, I can tell you those few bites, I think you're definitely there. That was amazing. We have a comment from Chris Tully, which is really nice. Todd, you're an inspiration. Great move to focus on wholesale and e-com. I look forward to seeing you grow into a national brand. So that was
very
kind.
Nice. Thank you,
Thanks, Chris. And then one question from Erwin. Thanks, Erwin Matthews. Todd, what's been your experience with the private equity community? And, we were talking about that a little bit earlier. Has anyone offered to fund your business since the Shark Tank appearance?
Yeah, with private equity, along the lines of venture capital, that might even be a little more aggressive than venture capital because private equity wants to come in and take over your business. And that really would have been no different than me, instead of giving Barb and Damon 50%, giving them 65%. But I think part of what makes up your DNA as an entrepreneur is, I don't want to say wanting to be in control, but wanting to be responsible for the end goal and the commitment and the drive. So I wouldn't say that we've had offers from private equity. I think it'll come as we get bigger. But up until this point, it's just been bank loans, friends and family, the old fashioned way,
Yeah, hanging on to that ownership is incredible. Okay. All right, Todd. Thank you so much. We have one last question for you today. If you had to distill your journey into one big picture lesson or takeaway, what would that be?
Be passionate. Believe in yourself, believe in your dream, and don't let anybody or anything stand in your way. But first and foremost, believe in yourself.
I can't agree more. Todd, thank you so much for joining us today. Everyone, head to Mr. Todd's Pies to get yourself one of these at mrtodds.com. We'll share some more links and some of Todd's story in the comments. But again, Todd, thank you so much. You are truly an inspiration and just a joy. So I hope we see you again soon.
Leah, thank you and everyone at Big Commerce for having me. I really appreciate it. And more importantly, I appreciate you having some dessert while we were talking.
I appreciate that more than anyone. So thank you, Tod. And thanks for everyone for tuning in. See you next time.
Have a great day.